Greetings. This is a second installment of a multi-part series looking at the Upper Peninsula and the issues it faces for the future. Our goal is to develop a picture of the future so that we can attract, retain the youth that is currently leaving the UP and the population decline that is stressing the UP. In this installment, we will talk about the population problem. Future, of course, we will talk about unemployment, tax revenue, the stresses. We'll talk about the headwinds, that's the global impacts, and then we're going to talk about the verticals to focus on and then a way forward. But first, let's talk about the population problem. You see in this chart that on the left side is the UP population, and on the right side is the Michigan population. So you can see the red has been declining steadily year over year, while Michigan continues to grow year over year. Starting in 1970, about 2044 is the end of this data set. Okay, you can see as this population declines, the problem is with Michigan growing, our tax revenue sharing ratios are impacted. So from a tax base, it hurts. The other thing that we can look at from this chart is you can see the drop off here starting about 15 years from now in 2035. That's due to death rate. But actually, the other thing you can glean from that, if the average age is 80 at death, let's back it up 15 years to now, which is 2021. And we know then that those people are in their mid 60s and they are now currently going into retirement. So not only is the population declining when we look at this chart, but the workforce is going to take a considerable hit starting today. The second chart over here is talking about employment index. And you can see how, while the UP in Michigan, they might wiggle a little bit, north and south, if you will, but Michigan always comes back while the UP normally does not. We call that the ratchet effect. And with almost every disruption that we've had in the industries of the UP, you can see this type of happening. And of course, we know that the industries have left the UP. The Ford left, manufacturing left in the 40s or so. And that was a shift in technology. And then we looked at mining and extraction. That's globalization, another disruption. Department stores in the early 2000s due to e-commerce, right? Digitization. It was the first thing that started impacting the economy in the UP regarding commerce. And, even in my hometown of Iron Mountain, Kingsford, we have a Walmart, but no longer do we have a Kmart, Shopko, Sears, or J.C. Penney's. So we've lost a lot of commerce for the area. Currently, we have timber, which is also now under disruption. And if you consider that people are reading their books on Kindles, the need for paper is radically and drastically decreasing, which is going to, again, impact one of the major industries here in the UP. Next, you can see universities. If COVID has taught us anything, is that universities will be under extreme pressure. Universities are one of the only industries that have never had a cost reduction mode in the past decades. And the universities, many of them have increased over 1,000% in cost over the past time. Universities, due to COVID and people now knowing they can remote learn, they do not need to spend $40,000 for brick and mortar education when they can do it for a couple $1,000s online. So we can expect the university industry in the UP to also be affected. Then we have tourism and casinos. If you think of casinos, most of the people in casinos are older in nature, because the younger people, if they are going to gamble, they'll do it on their smartphone. You've heard of course, goldennugget.com, mgmbet.com, and all these other .coms, which are now radically disrupting the casino business. The people that are there today, and let's say in their 60s, in a few years, they will no longer be part of the casino package or the casino infrastructure or economy. And therefore, all of that economy will leave the UP. So we see that population has a big effect And then, of course, the industries have a big effect on where the UP is going to be going. But let's talk about population for a quick second. Here is an example of Japan. Starting in 1950, you can see here, this is the population. The gold is woman and the red is men. You can see here's the age moving up. So at the bottom, relatively healthy, this is called tree, a tree, it looks like a spruce tree. We're having a lot of babies in Japan. And as time goes on, these people get older and of course they die out. So in 1950, this was the population demographic of Japan. 2005, 55 years later, you can start to see how it's getting fatter on top and thinner on the bottom. Estimated in 2050, 45 years from now, you can see it now, it looks like a kite, tree to a kite. It's very heavy on the top, very small on the bottom. They are not having this, a sufficient number of children. And therefore, the population is becoming very critical. In other words, there's not young people able to take on the role of caregivers for the old people. This is a well-known problem. In fact, China, which had for decades a one-child policy, has just in the past weeks reversed that to now a three-child policy, because China is starting to develop the same problem and they're trying to act to avoid it. Another way to help with this is with immigration, bringing workers in, bringing other cultures in. In China, just because of their culture, they really have a hard time with immigration. So how to solve this is still a big mystery in Japan. But let's look a little bit more at this data because it's interesting that what you can glean. And here you see it's quite fat along the bottom. This is 1945 to 1950, and it's basically the baby boomers. We had the same thing in the United States. Here, this is about, let's say, 5 to 10-year-old people, kids. Well, they didn't have that many kids because there was a war. If you look here on this side, you can see there's a bit of a dent right here regarding demographics because the ages of 25 to 40 men were lost in the war, and there's why that depression results. Now you can follow these depressions up through time, professions and bulges, if you will. So here's this bulge, add 55 years to it. So now we're at approximately 60-ish, and there's the bulge. And here's the depression that we see here is now at this spot. All right. So as it grows, then you can notice that this depression here at the age of 40, add 45 years, it's 85, and there we have it. All right. So we can read things out of these demographic charts that are really very instructive. So if I now move to the UP, said, what do we have? Well, we can only go back to 1990, let's say conveniently. And if you look at 1990, it's somewhat of a tree. It's a little fatter on the bottom. Maybe it's a little fatter in the midsection, but 2005, 15 years later, comes along and you can see that it's getting thinner at the bottom. And this slug of older people has matured by 15 years. And now we get to 2019. Here we are. And that slug of people has now matured to be around, let's say, 60. And they are now starting to go into retirement. You can see that it's gotten thinner in the midsection and quite thin on the bottom section. Here you can look at this bump, if you will, and this is the universities, LSSU, Northern Michigan, Michigan Tech. And so, yeah, these kids come from all over the world to study at our universities in the UP, and it's a great thing, but then they leave. Okay, you can see back here in 1990, it was not so prevalent, but today it is very prevalent, and this is a serious issue for us. So when we looked to these charts, we say, all right, yes, the youth does seem to be slowing down. Let's take a deeper look at it. And here we have, at this point right here, from 1990 to 2019, just looking at the ages 0 to 19, it continues to decline. This is not a sustainable future for the UP. So with that, just look some fun facts. You can see in 2030, because that's what we're always looking for is 2030, try to turn this ship around. The workforce will have dropped by 17,000 as these older people go into retirement. The younger people will continue to leave, drops by another 7,000. And another really important message here is Starting at the 1990 till today, the average age in the UP has increased by 5 months a year. The average age in 1990 was 33. The average age today is 48. We know that in the future that the retirees will increase, continue to increase. And what this says is the trend of youth versus the old population, which is accelerating. uh, Healthcare employment becomes that much more stressed. The healthcare industry, who's going to take care of all these older people? So that is just a first slug of data. I'd like you to think about what it really means for us, but you can see that we are moving into uncharted waters and that we do have a population problem. Okay, the next installment, as I've said, we'll start looking at the employment index. We'll start looking at the tax revenue situation. In the meantime, I implore you, please tell your family and friends and colleagues to sign up at empower906.org, join the newsletter, and let's become UPR activists. Thank you.